What if the battles you're facing right now aren't really about other people? What if the conflict around you is actually revealing a deeper conflict within you? And what if the breakthrough you're praying for begins with surrender, not control? There are moments in life when everything feels like a struggle. Relationships become tense, emotions run high, peace feels distant, and it's easy to look outward, to blame circumstances, to point at others, to justify our reactions. But in Epistle of James chapter 4, verses 1 to 12, we are confronted with a truth that shifts everything. The real battle often starts within. James asks a piercing question: what causes fights and quarrels among you? It's a question we might answer quickly. They hurt me. They misunderstood me. They started it. But James doesn't point outward, he points inward. Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? That's uncomfortable, because it means the conflict we see on the outside is often a reflection of something happening on the inside. Desires. Not all desires are wrong, but when they become controlling, when they become demands instead of preferences, they begin to create tension. James says, you desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. This is not just about extreme actions, it's about the condition of the heart. It's about wanting something so badly that it begins to shape how you treat others. It could be recognition, respect, control, approval. And when those desires aren't met, frustration grows. That frustration turns into conflict. And suddenly, the issue isn't just external, it's deeply internal. James goes further. He says, you do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives. This reveals something important. Sometimes, even our prayers are shaped by self-centered desires. We ask, but we ask for things that feed our ego, not our spirit. We seek outcomes that benefit us, not necessarily align us with God. And when those prayers go unanswered, we feel confused. But James is calling us to examine not just what we ask for, but why we ask. Because motives matter. Then comes a strong and direct statement. Friendship with the world means enmity against God. That doesn't mean avoiding people or living in isolation. It means adopting the values of a world that prioritizes self over God. A world that promotes pride, independence, and control. A mindset that says, I'll handle this on my own. But that mindset creates distance between us and God. Because God doesn't call us to independence from Him. He calls us to dependence on Him. And this is where everything begins to shift. James gives a simple but powerful command. Submit yourselves then to God. Submit. That word is not popular. It sounds like weakness. It sounds like losing control. But in reality, it's the beginning of true strength. To submit to God means to recognize that He knows better. It means to trust His direction over your own instincts. It means to release control and allow Him to lead. And here's the promise that follows. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Notice the order. First, submit to God. Then, resist the enemy. You can't effectively resist what's wrong until you first align yourself with what's right. Submission is not defeat, it's positioning. It places you under God's authority where His strength becomes your protection. Then James continues, come near to God and He will come near to you. That's an invitation, not a demand, not a threat, an invitation. No matter how far you feel, no matter how distracted, how overwhelmed, how distant, you can draw near. And when you take that step, God responds. He meets you there. He doesn't ignore you. He doesn't push you away. He comes near. But James also calls for honesty. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. This isn't about shame, it's about clarity. It's about recognizing areas where your life is divided, where part of you wants God and part of you wants control, where your actions don't fully align with your faith. Double-mindedness creates instability. It keeps you stuck between two directions, and James is calling you to choose, to realign, to return fully. He even says, grieve, mourn and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. This may sound intense, but it reflects the seriousness of sin. Not to push you into despair, but to awaken you, to help you see clearly what needs to change. Because transformation begins with awareness. And then comes one of the most beautiful promises in this passage. Humble yourselves before the Lord and He will lift you up. Not maybe, not eventually, He will. Humility is the pathway to elevation in God's kingdom. Not pride, not self-promotion, not striving to prove yourself, but choosing to lower yourself before God, acknowledging your need, your dependence, your limitations. And in that posture, God moves. He lifts you, He restores you, He strengthens you. Then James shifts to how we treat others. Do not slander one another. Again, the focus returns to relationships. Because what's in your heart shows up in how you speak about others. When you judge, criticize, or tear people down, you're placing yourself in a position of authority that doesn't belong to you. James reminds us, there is only one lawgiver and judge. That's God, not us. So instead of judging others, we are called to examine ourselves, to reflect, to grow, to align. This entire passage points to one central truth. The life you want begins with surrender. Not control, not force, not manipulation. Surrender. Submitting to God is not about losing your identity, it's about discovering it. It's about letting go of what's hurting you, even if it feels familiar. It's about releasing the need to control outcomes. It's about trusting that God's way is better, even when it's harder. And yes, it's not easy. Surrender goes against our natural instincts. We want to hold on. We want to manage everything. We want to be in charge. But that's where the struggle begins. Because we were never meant to carry that weight alone. God invites us into something different. A life of trust, a life of peace, a life where we don't have to fight every battle ourselves, but that life starts with the decision, a choice to step back and say, God, I trust you. Even when you don't understand, even when things don't go your way, even when it requires letting go. Because on the other side of surrender is freedom. Freedom from constant striving, freedom from internal conflict, freedom from the pressure to control everything, and in that freedom you find something deeper. Peace, clarity, strength. So today, take a moment. Look at your life. Where are you holding on too tightly? Where are you trying to control instead of trust? Where are your desires creating tension instead of peace? And then ask yourself, am I willing to surrender this to God? Because that's where change begins. Not in doing more, but in letting go. Not in fighting harder, but in trusting deeper. And as you begin to submit yourself to God, something shifts. Your perspective changes, your heart softens, your life aligns, and step by step, you move closer to the life you were meant to live. A life not defined by conflict, but by peace. Not driven by control, but guided by trust. Not centered on self, but rooted in God. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.